in 4 years cannot be achieved within the president's own stipulated timeline. The new timeline is now 2024.
By the end of the 4 years of my term in office as president, Accra will be the cleanest city in Africa.
Inshallah, the president will go for 2 terms, and at the end, Accra would have been, and we are on course.
This is Top Story with Evans Mensah.
Top Story is always brought to you by Bond. Your success, our passion. Also brought to you by Gasem, the nation builder. Vodafone. The future is exciting, ready, and nationwide health insurance, your healthcare family. Now, it appears the deadline for the president's own promise to make Accra the cleanest city in Accra has been pushed further. In April 2017, President Akufo-Addo promised to make Accra the cleanest city in the whole of the continent by the end of his first term. And he was very specific, putting specific number of years to it. He said 4 years. He spoke at the ceremony in Jamestown where he was installed as a chief by the English Alata Traditional Council. Listening to him speaking back then in 2017.
The developments that have been made to clean up the Korle Lagoon are very important for the welfare of Accra. Like the harbour, in Kufuor's time, plans were made, sods were cut, but since then nothing has happened. We're going to begin again. The commitment I want to make is a commitment I want all of us to make, that within these 4 years, by the end of the 4 years of my term in office as president, Accra will be the cleanest city in Africa. That is where we want to get to. That is the commitment I'm making on your behalf and on all our behalves, that by the end of the 4 years of Akufo-Addo's presidency, Accra will be the cleanest city in the entire African continent.
So 2 years on, is the president still sticking with the timelines? We've been hearing from the sanitation minister today at the press briefing, and my colleague Ernest Menu was there for us. Ernest, so what in essence was the minister addressing today? Why was this press conference called?
She was called to essentially brief Ghanaians on what she's done since she took over as sanitation minister. Remember, we had Kofi Adda. There was a reshuffle. She had to go there. And so she was essentially telling us what she has done, plans they put in place to ensure that, we have good sanitation, but also to achieve the president's, vision of making Accra the cleanest in Africa.
And this is another reason why this is important. Also because of the flooding we've had recently with the many lives lost, and we know one of the key reasons that has been pointed to as a reason why we've been having the perennial flooding is sanitation.
Poor sanitation.
Where a lot of the solid waste is going into the drains, choking up the drains and causing flooding. And so we've heard from the Works and Housing Minister. We're now hearing from the sanitation minister. Last week she went around herself to see what was happening, and so it's important for her to brief the nation on what she's doing to fix the problems with sanitation.
And on the issue of solid waste, she said that so far the report she gets is that we've been able to manage 75% of solid waste in the country. We have to deal with the 25%, and so that's as far as solid waste is concerned.
But what is attracting a lot of controversy today? We just heard the president there talking in 2017 when he had just taken over as president of the republic and declaring quite boldly then that his intention, his number one goal as far as sanitation was concerned, was to make Accra the cleanest city in the whole of Africa in 4 years, and it kept on repeating the 4-year timeline that he has self-imposed. Then we heard today from the new sanitation minister, and she gives a totally different timeline to this.
Absolutely. And it's important to note, Evans, it's interesting that this is coming around this time because the president spoke on the 24th of April 2017. Today is 23rd. So tomorrow will be exactly 2 years. The president made those comments at Jamestown. And this was triggered, the minister's response, which we'll be hearing shortly, was triggered by a question from my colleague at Manjo Online, Abu. And the question was, what deadline has the president given you for delivering the promise of making Accra the cleanest city in Africa? What is your strategy, referring to the minister, in order to achieve this? And as far as budget is concerned, what can you tell us?
This was her answer to that question.
Yes, inshallah, the president will go for 2 terms, and at the end, Accra would have been, and we are on course. God is in control, and the battle is still the Lord's. And to tell you that His Excellency, the President, is so serious with this call to all of us to make Accra the cleanest city and Ghana a clean country, that he has put the Ministry of Sanitation and Water Resources on the top priority list of government to be able to access all the budget that we need for this. That answers the budget. And the strategy is what we spelled out in some of our, some parts of the presentation. If you have ideas, we are welcome. We are welcome to your office. You are welcome to our office. It's a give and take. And if we succeed, it's kudos to all of us. And we will succeed. So please come on board and make Ghana a better place for all of us.
So that's Cecilia Dapaah. She's called the Minister for Sanitation. And the essential bit is the first bit of what she says, which is in the timeline that the government is declaring to fix the problem and also achieve the president's own ambition of making Accra the cleanest city in Africa. Listen to that part. Listen.
Yes, inshallah, the president will go for 2 terms, and at the end, Accra would have been, and we are on course.
So 2 terms,
2 terms.
she says. Yeah. God willing, the president will go for 2 terms, and at the end.
Yeah.
But that's not what the president said.
No, that's not what the president said. The president said emphatically that at the end of my 4-year tenure, my first term in office, Accra, he hopes to be, and he actually was promising that he would make Accra the cleanest city in Africa.
So that's some clarity there, because up until now, that question has been asked a few times. I mean, are we on course? There have been several assessments of where we are. We'll be speaking to the coalition of NGOs in sanitation. They've been working on this for a while. What they make of this new deadline? The minister says that they've been giving the resources, but expect the president's ambition to be achieved in 2024. That's the end of the second year, assuming the president gets a second chance to go again. And so that's where we are with this in terms of the timeline, an update on where we are. And again, I must point out that this is important today only because of what we know has happened over the last few days with the flooding. Last week, she was on the ground, the minister, touring some of the affected areas just to see things for herself. And I guess it's on the back of that she decides to address the country on this. Well, that's not all she's been saying. She's also made some announcements in terms of other strategies that government intends to roll out when it comes to punishing people who put...
So she talks about sanitation guards. She says already some of the MMDAs, have started, deploying these sanitation guards across the country. For instance, next week she's going to launch the one for Tung. But the deadline, the promise again this time around is that by July, all MMDAs, I beg your pardon, should have deployed sanitation officers across the country to ensure strict compliance to the laws on sanitation.
The Ministry of Sanitation and Water Resources, in collaboration with the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development, has stepped up its monitoring efforts to ensure enhanced service delivery by the MMDAs and members of the Environmental Services Providers Association, known as ESPA. Our attitude and behavior are very important contributing factors in ensuring that our cities and major towns are kept clean at all times. Consequently, the ministry has decided to continue to facilitate the deployment of sanitation guards. This is ongoing by the MMDCs, and we hope that by July this year, all the MMDAs would have put their guards in place. We are to launch the one in Pong in a week's time. This is to strengthen the enforcement of the sanitation bylaws to maintain cleanliness in our cities, towns, and villages. Honorable Chairperson, with the changing trends in the management of environmental sanitation services, the Ministry will review the 2010 Environmental Sanitation Policy, which provides guidance and vision for the metropolitan, municipal, and district assemblies to implement sanitation in a more structured and holistic manner.
So, Enes, that's the minister talking about the policy of rolling out the
Sanitation guards.
guards into the country. This is going to come in July.
Yes, so she noted that some of the assemblies have already started. They've deployed people. There are some that are still outstanding. But by July, we should have all of these assemblies deploy people out there. So it means that by July, you should see people, sanitation guards, in your vicinity to ensure that people actually abide or comply with the rules on sanitation.
Did she say anything about the cost of keeping the country clean?
She referred to a document or some work that had been done by the World Bank. It's costing us over $200 million, every year on sanitation. But she says that can be turned around if we choose to invest in sanitation.
According to a study by the Water and Sanitation Program of the World Bank, poor sanitation costs Ghana up to $290 million annually. This amount is equivalent to $12 per person per year in Ghana, which translates to 1.6% of the national GDP. It makes a lot of economic sense to invest in sanitation. Every dollar invested in sanitation yields $5 dividends.
We can now speak to the Vice Chairman of the Coalition of NGOs in Water and Sanitation, Atahim. Mr. Atahim, thank you for your time here on Top Story.
Thank you for having me.
Just listen to this contrast, 2 years on, and it's almost like a day shy of exactly 2 years in terms of the timeline that I know Cornel West has been quite key to monitor. This is the president then, and this is the sanitation minister today.
By the end of the 4 years of my term in office as president, Accra will be the cleanest city in Africa.
Inshallah, the president will go for 2 terms, and at the end, Accra would have been, and we are on course.
Does it matter that it's no longer 4 years, but at the end of the second term, which will be 2024, that we'll achieve this target?
Thank you very much, Evans. Let me state, first of all, that we were happy with the launch of the National Sanitation Campaign and the promise of the president to make Accra the cleanest city in Africa. And, of course, the timeline was by 2020, at the end of the first 4 years. But I like the question you asked. It doesn't really matter for me because I am on record to have said that it was going to be very, very difficult for us to achieve, this feat with Accra becoming the cleanest city in Africa in 4 years. And it was exactly because the countries who have taken the lead are so far ahead of us that it was not going to take 4 years to be able to catch up and overtake them. Apart from that, the level of resourcing for the sector is very low. If you look at the financing for sanitation in Ghana, it is one of the lowest in Africa. So how are you going to use this very limited financing or funding to be able to attain this feat? Apart from that, we are not enforcing our laws, our policies, our bylaws. Not to even talk about recycling. Only 2% of the waste we generate in Ghana is recycled. And the rest find themselves into drains and gutters and all that. And so, I am not interested in whether it's going to be 4 years or 8 years. If we do not begin to put in the right measures, if we do not begin to inject the resources, if we do not begin to enforce the laws and start some level of recycling, we are not going to get there.
Question: Have you seen enough in the last 2 years to be convinced that the government is backing up that bold talk with action?
Unfortunately, no. In fact, if you look at the budget analysis that we have done, this is rather the time that the budget for water and sanitation is dwindling. At a time that so many initiatives have been rolled out, including One House, One Toilet, and the Accra as the cleanest city in Africa, among many others. So we would have expected that financing would have increased, especially so because we have a new ministry for sanitation and water resources. But unfortunately, we are not seeing the right steps being taken to arrive at the destination that we all want to reach.
back to the question about the timeline. I know you say for you it doesn't matter because you haven't seen enough in there, and you knew when the president said it that we could not attain it. But the president of the republic said it, and he was categorical, repeating it. 4 years, I'll fix this. And knowing how important sanitation is to this country, in the last 1 week, we've talked about a lot of lives lost, right? And I guess it's within that context that the minister felt the need to address the nation today, because we know that the drawings are choked with solid waste and leading to deaths. Isn't that why, I guess, you can argue that the timeline was absolutely essential, that if indeed we were committed to it, and we said 4 years, then we should have seen commensurate investment in there so that we fulfill the president's wish. And now we're hearing where we are shifting it to 2024. What is the guarantee that in the next, 6 years that we'll have to 2024,
Perfect.
things will be done differently?
Good question you've asked. And that is the reason I'm saying that it doesn't really matter. You see, if we begin to take the steps and put in the right resources, the mechanisms in place, then we'll know that we are getting somewhere. But so far, from where I sit, I am not seeing the right measures, the steps, the law enforcement, the resource mobilization, going on. And so I cannot be very confident that we are going to arrive there even in 2024. But you see, the happiness we expressed was born out of the fact that when the president speaks, ministers are called to work, chief executives go to work and all that. So we're expecting that even if we don't get to become the cleanest city in Africa, at least we may become the cleanest in West Africa. And that would have been okay. But let us see the steps, the right steps being taken first. You mentioned the National Sanitation Policy. And let me tell you that policy has even expired. And so far, we have not seen the attempts to even revise it. There are so many things that the sector needs to do before it can really begin to think about achieving this feat. Otherwise, I'm sorry, we will talk and talk, not go into action, and we'll be where we are in the next 6 or so years to come.
So should these political leaders be making all these timeline promises then, seeing that you haven't backed it up with any action in the past?
Well, maybe, you see, the president may have had good intentions of making, these promises. But we expected that the sanitation and water ministry would have gone to work. We expected that the local government ministry would have gone to work. The finance ministry would have ensured that these sectors receive adequate financing to be able to achieve this. But we haven't seen them happen. And, well, I'm not saying that the president should not continue to make these promises. But when these promises are made, we expect the technocrats, we expect the ministries, departments, and agencies to work to ensure that these promises come to fruition.
Now, well, the reality is we have another promise with another timeline, at least. The beauty of having timelines is that you can monitor. And then exactly what we've done today, and that's we asked the question to the press conference that brought up this new timeline, because it's important for us to monitor, especially because of the recent deaths we've had because of flooding in Accra. Now we have a new timeline. Is Konwa interested, like you did before, to monitor to ensure at least you're holding government to their own promises?
Let me tell you that next week we may probably be coming out with an assessment of the performance of the government in terms of sanitation. And we are looking at the National Sanitation Campaign. We are taking them one by one, 11 or 13 items that the President mentioned. And we are going to take them one by one to review the status of implementation of these promises. And then we will let Ghanaians know whether we are on course or not. And then we will also give our recommendations as to what we can do as a country to ensure that sanitation is given the priority it deserves, so that we do not go into the situation that we find ourselves in again.
I'm grateful that you joined us. That's Mr. Ahin there. He is the Vice President of the Coalition of NGOs in Water and Sanitation. I know the Environment, Science and Technology Committee in Parliament, in the wake of the recent devastating floods that have claimed so many lives in the last 3 weeks, have been taking a keen interest in the sanitation situation. We can speak to the ranking member on that committee, Ebenezer Tek Labi, joins us on the telephone line. Mr. Labi, thank you for your time here on Top Story.
Thank you for having me.
Surprised to hear that the new deadline for the government in attaining the cleaner city in Africa goal is now 2024.
Thank you very much. Let me greet our cherished listeners. Isn't it interesting? Because I am not surprised. Because if indeed the president was very serious, the first budget of the president, okay, there would have been an indication of, some seriousness. But then you look at when it comes to sanitation in this country, the onus lies on the local government entities. I mean the municipal assemblies and district assemblies, and you have a situation where government, through its budget, capped, virtually reduced the monies that are sent to these areas, for work to be done. You have reduced whatever they will take to take care of the environment, and you expect that you can meet your promise. No.
Are you saying that based on the budgets you've reviewed, and I know your committee has oversight, based on the budgets you've reviewed, government is doing the opposite of what it promised?
Of course, yes. It shows that government. Government did not show commitment, and that is what the results we are reaping now, and that's what we are seeing now. So I am not surprised that they've come back to review. I don't know what went into the thinking before the extension to 2024, because the promise was that they were going to make sure that Accra was clean, even Accra was clean within a year.
Within 4 years, the president said 4 years.
No, in fact, within 4. But you see, if you look at the rate, we are in the third year now. We are in the third year. What have we? What have they done? What demonstrable effort has been put in place to show that something is being done to make sure that the whole city is rid of the waste that we are seeing? Gutters are still choked. We are still experiencing the flooding at our door and all over. So I think that the government promise, I don't know. It was a political promise, fine. There was no commitment. Indeed, it was shown in the budget, by capping, the funding that goes to the district assembly, because the onus lies on them. In fact, everything is, at the district assembly. If you deny them of the funds, what you are telling them that they should hold on, they should wait till 2024. Let's get serious.
You mentioned what government has done. Today, the sanitation minister addressing the press conference said that in July they're rolling out sanitation guards in the district assemblies who are properly funded to check. And because we know one of the biggest problems is attitudinal. People are still putting solid waste into drains. Isn't that something that is worth commending?
Well, you see, if they will walk their talk, but as I said, I have not seen anything to hold on to, to believe in what the minister is saying, because one promise after the other. We've been told a lot, and as I'm saying, the indications are that send money, let the common fund get to the assembly. If you reduce the common fund and you centralize it and you divert the money into other things, nothing will go on. Because if you are saying you are going to deploy sanitating guards, are they going to be removing garbage from the gutters? Are they going to be doing the desilting? Are they the ones going to cover the open gutters? No, the open drains. No, these are not the people who are going to be doing that. To start with, we need money to do desilting. We need money, to remove garbage from the gutters. We need money.
There's evidence that they've already started the desilting. We know Dreadmasters have the contract now and the desilting has started. This is confirmed.
Well, let's wait and see.
Mr. Telabi, I'm grateful for your time here on Top Story. That's the ranking member on the Environment, Science and Technology Committee in Parliament, Ebenezer Telabi. So this is something that I'll be interrogating a bit more. We've tried to reach the minister, but she says she's in a meeting, unable to speak to the issues beyond the press conference that she had today. But if you join us on Newsline in a short while, NDC demands overhauling of Interministerial Committee Against Illegal illegal mining as he accused the government of endorsing criminality in the complex Galamsey menace. We'll have details plus a call for prosecution of some presidential staffers who they accuse of promoting the illegality. They've also been having their say of the pronouncements by Senior Minister Yao Safo-Mafo, calling it shameful. We'll interrogate all that when we join you later on at 6 with the very latest from across the world on Newsnight. Top Story is always brought to you by Bond Savings and Loans. Your success are passion. Also brought to you by Gas and Cement, the Nation Builder, Vodafone. The future is exciting, ready, and Nationwide Health Insurance. Your healthcare family.